In the shadowed corridors of power, where empires rise and fall on the edge of a whispered word, where kingdoms crumble not from external siege but from internal rot, there exists a question so profound, so terrifying in its implications, that most men dare not ask it. What if the greatest enemy you face is not the cunning adversary plotting against you, but the stupidity festering within your own mind? This is not a question for the comfortable. It is not a gentle inquiry for those who sleep peacefully in their assumptions. This is the brutal examination that separates the wheat from the chaff, the rulers from the ruled, the survivors from the forgotten. For in a world where cunning men shape destiny and fools become footnotes in history, the most dangerous position is not to be weak. Weakness can be overcome, strength can be built, but to be stupid without the terrible awareness of your own stupidity. Machiavelli, that master architect of power's dark geometry, understood this truth with crystalline clarity. He observed the courts of princes, the rise and fall of dynasties, the endless dance between predator and prey that defines human ambition. And in his observations, he discovered something that chills the soul of every man honest enough to confront it. Stupidity is not merely the absence of intelligence. It is an active force of destruction, a cancer that devours not just the fool who harbors it, but everyone unfortunate enough to be caught in its wake. Today, we strip away the comfortable illusions, the pleasant lies we tell ourselves about human nature. We examine the 6 unmistakable signs of the stupid man, not because knowledge is power, though it is, but because ignorance is death. These signs are not academic curiosities to be discussed over wine and forgotten by morning. They are survival tools, the difference between thriving and merely existing, between commanding respect and becoming invisible, between writing your own story and having it written by others. The first and most seductive trap that ensnares the stupid man is his fatal belief that kindness is armor, that goodness is a shield that will protect him from the sharp edges of human nature. Watch him as he moves through the world, this well-meaning fool, wearing his compassion like chainmail, convinced that if he extends his hand in friendship, the world will not bite it off at the wrist. He enters every room believing that his pure intentions will be recognized, that his noble heart will be rewarded, that the universe operates on some cosmic system of fairness, where good deeds generate good returns. This man has never truly studied the history he claims to know, never really absorbed the lessons written in blood across the centuries. He has somehow convinced himself that he lives in a fairy tale rather than in the brutal reality where power flows not to the deserving, but to those cunning enough to seize it. In every interaction, he reveals this fundamental misunderstanding of how the world actually operates. He apologizes for things he never did, accepting blame to keep the peace. He tolerates insults wrapped in polite language, preferring the comfortable lie of civility to the uncomfortable truth of disrespect. He agrees to terms that undervalue him, believing that being reasonable will eventually be recognized and rewarded. He laughs nervously when others cross his boundaries, treating violations of his dignity as minor social awkwardnesses rather than deliberate tests of his weakness. The stupid man calls this behavior, compassion, perhaps even nobility. Those who understand power recognize it for what it truly is. Vulnerability advertised to every predator in the vicinity. He might as well paint a target on his back and ring a bell to announce his presence to those who feed on the naive and the weak. But here's where his delusion becomes most dangerous. Not just to himself, but to anyone who depends on him. He gives without limit. Not from genuine generosity, but from a desperate need to be liked. He forgives without requiring change. Not from wisdom, but from fear of confrontation. He trusts without verification, not from strength, but from an inability to face the complexity of human nature. Every act of supposed virtue becomes an advertisement of his Watch how quickly the ecosystem of manipulation forms around him. The flatterer appears, speaking honeyed words that feed his ego while picking his pocket. The emotional vampire latches onto his endless willingness to give, draining him of energy, resources, and peace of mind. The narcissist recognizes him as perfect supply. Someone who will consistently provide attention and validation without demanding anything meaningful in return. And what does our noble fool do when he finds himself surrounded by these parasites? He gives more. He tries, harder. He bends further backward to accommodate those who are systematically destroying him. He has been so thoroughly programmed to believe that goodness equals safety that he cannot recognize when his very virtue has become the weapon being used against him. The more he offers, the less he is valued. This is the iron law of human psychology that the stupid man never learns. Value is created through scarcity, through boundaries, through the willingness to walk away. But he makes himself infinitely available, eternally willing, constantly eager to prove his worth through service rather than commanding respect through strength. He becomes the person everyone calls when they need something, but no one invites when they re-celebrating success. He becomes the reliable option, never the exciting choice. He becomes useful, never respected. And in his desperate attempts to be loved, he becomes invisible to those whose attention he most craves. The second sign reveals itself in his relationship with silence and speech. The stupid man cannot bear the weight of quiet moments. He fills every pause with words. Not because he has something valuable to say, but because he fears the power that exists in stillness. He has never learned that silence is not emptiness, is pregnant with possibility. Heavy with potential, dangerous in its unpredictability. In rooms full of strangers, he becomes a fountain of personal information, spilling his secrets like water from a broken vessel. He tells them about his plans before they are secure, his fears before he has conquered them, his dreams before he has the power to protect them. He mistakes vulnerability for authenticity, not understanding that authenticity without strength is simply weakness dressed in noble language. The wise man enters a room and studies it like a battlefield. He observes the power dynamics, identifies the key players, recognizes the unspoken tensions that vibrate beneath polite conversation. He collects information while revealing nothing, building a map of opportunity while keeping his own position hidden. But the stupid man! He becomes the entertainment, the source of amusement, the predictable element that adds no mystery or danger to the equation. Every word he speaks becomes intelligence in the hands of others. His political opinions, shared too freely, create enemies where silence would have left allies. His personal struggles, revealed to openly become ammunition for those who would use his pain against him. His ambitions, declared too loudly, awaken the very forces that will work to ensure those ambitions never come to fruition. He brags about victories not yet won, as if speaking success into existence could somehow make it real. He complains about problems he should be solving, advertising his weakness to those who are evaluating whether he deserves their respect or their contempt. He speaks of loyalty to people who are testing him, failing to understand that loyalty proven through words is worthless compared to loyalty demonstrated through action. The stupid man believes that communication equals connection, that sharing equals bonding, that openness equals strength. But those who understand the true nature of power know that every word is a choice. Every revelation is a transaction, and every moment of speech is an opportunity either gained or lost forever. The third sign manifests in his relationship with trust, that most precious and dangerous of human commodities. In the hands of a wise man, trust is a weapon, carefully crafted and precisely deployed. It is given only after a person has proven their worth through consistent action across time and through difficulty. It is extended gradually in small increments that can be tested and measured before larger investments are made. But the stupid man treats trust like a renewable resource to be scattered freely to anyone who presents a friendly face. He operates from a default position of believing the best about people, not from wisdom or experience, but from a desperate need to see the world as a place where his naive approach to life might actually work. He listens to what people say rather than watching what they do. He accepts apologies without observing whether behavior actually changes. He forms partnerships with people whose character he has never tested under pressure, whose integrity he has never witnessed when they thought no one was watching, whose loyalty he has never seen when it would cost them something to demonstrate it. This is not noble. This is not enlightened. This is strategic suicide dressed up as virtue. The stupid man becomes a pawn precisely because he hands over the keys to his life to people who have never proven they deserve such access. He tells secrets to acquaintances, lends money to people who charm him at parties, and confides his deepest fears to individuals who have done nothing to earn such intimate knowledge of his vulnerabilities. When the inevitable betrayal comes, and it always comes, he calls it bad luck or misfortune. He fails to recognize that he created the conditions for his own destruction. By refusing to test the mettle of those he allowed close, he confused friendliness with friendship, charisma with character, and smooth words with genuine intentions. The powerful man understands that trust is not a gift, it is a transaction. It must be earned through the hard currency of consistency, time, and trial. Anything less is not trust at all, but simply hope dressed up in the clothing of wisdom. The fourth sign reveals the stupid man's most pathetic weakness: his insatiable hunger for validation. There exists a chasm between the man who commands respect and the man who begs for approval. And the stupid man invariably chooses the side that leads to his own diminishment. He walks into every room with a question written in his posture, echoing in his desperate laughter, pleading through his eager agreement with whatever opinion seems popular. Do you like me? This question becomes his master, and he becomes its slave. One compliment can purchase his loyalty. One rejection can ruin his week. One cold glance from someone he considers important can throw his entire emotional state into chaos. His self-worth has been built not on the solid foundation of his own achievements and principles, but on the shifting sands of other people, as opinions a foundation that crumbles at the first sign of disapproval. Watch how he conducts himself in social situations. He over-explains every decision, as if his choices require the approval of a committee. He apologizes for taking up space, for having opinions, for existing in a way that might inconvenience others. He agrees with the majority, even when it violates his own deeply held beliefs, because fitting in feels safer than standing firm on principle. The tragic irony is that in his desperate attempt to be liked by everyone, he becomes respected by no one. Those whose approval he craves most, the strong, the successful, the powerful, see through his performance immediately. They recognize him as someone who can be controlled through the simple manipulation of attention and approval. They smile to his face while feeling nothing but contempt for his weakness. Respect is born from boundaries, from the willingness to be disliked for the right reasons, from the strength to maintain your principles even when it costs you social comfort. But the stupid man has no boundaries. He won't cross for acceptance. No principles he won't abandon for a moment of approval. No dignity he won't sacrifice for the illusion of belonging. He becomes common, replaceable, forgettable. He blends into the crowd, not by choice, but by design, never making anyone uncomfortable enough to remember him, never disagreeing strongly enough to be taken seriously, never leading anything, because leadership requires the courage to be disliked by those you must guide. The fifth sign manifests in his complete inability to separate emotion from strategy. The stupid man reacts rather than responds. He is driven by feelings rather than guided by wisdom. His emotions are not tools in service of his goals, they are chains that bind him. 2. Patterns of behavior that ensure his continued one insult and he explodes in righteous indignation, not understanding that his reaction is exactly what his enemy hoped to provoke. One disappointment and he collapses into self-pity, advertising his fragility to everyone watching. One betrayal and he becomes consumed by a thirst for vengeance he lacks the power to properly satisfy. His emotional incontinence makes him the most predictable player in any game of power. He mistakes feeling deeply for acting wisely, not understanding that emotion clouds the battlefield of decision. When insulted, instead of smiling coldly and filing the information away for future use, he defends himself loudly, confirming that the insult found its mark. When he fails, instead of regrouping in silence and analyzing his mistakes, he complains publicly, seeking pity from those who are evaluating whether he deserves their respect or their contempt. The powerful man learns early to pause, to think, to wait. He does not move until he understands the terrain, until he has calculated the costs and benefits, until he can act from a position of strength rather than weakness. But the stupid man moves based on mood. If he is angry, he strikes without timing. If he is afraid, he retreats without thinking. If he is excited, he reveals his intentions to the very people who will use them against him. His face becomes a book that anyone can read. He cannot hide rage, cannot disguise envy, cannot mask disappointment. His enemies do not need to guess what he is feeling, because it radiates from every expression, every gesture, every poorly chosen word. They watch him, study him, and manipulate him like a musician playing a familiar instrument. The sixth and final sign completes the portrait of his destruction, his absolute refusal to accept responsibility for his failures. The stupid man lives in a world where every setback is someone else's fault, where every disappointment is evidence of conspiracy rather than consequence, where every failure is proof of injustice rather than incompetence. When he is passed over for promotion, it was office politics. When his relationships fail, it was the other person's issues. When his business ventures collapse, it was market conditions beyond his control. Never not once does he ask the question that might actually save him. What weakness in me created the conditions for this failure? He cannot ask this question because it requires the very thing he fears most. Brutal to look in the mirror and see not a victim of circumstances, but the architect of his own misfortune would require him to accept that change is not only possible, but necessary. And change demands effort, discipline, and the courage to abandon comfortable delusions in favor of uncomfortable truths. So he projects his failures onto the world around him. He attacks the success of others, calling it luck rather than recognizing the preparation, sacrifice, and strategic thinking that created it. He mocks those who rise above their circumstances rather than studying their methods. He surrounds himself with other failures who confirm his delusions rather than challenging him to grow. This is perhaps the most damning sign of all, because it ensures that he will never escape the prison of his own limitations. A man cannot fix what he refuses to acknowledge is broken. He cannot grow if he insists there is nothing wrong with his approach. He cannot adapt if he believes he is always the victim of forces beyond his control. The stupid man is allergic to responsibility because responsibility demands accountability, and accountability demands change. It is far easier to maintain the comfortable fiction that the world is unfair than to confront the brutal reality that his own poor decisions, undisciplined habits, and emotional weakness created the trap in which he now lives. Machiavelli never pitied such men. He studied them with the cold fascination of a scientist examining a particularly interesting form of self-destruction. He watched as they destroyed themselves, not through one dramatic mistake, but through 1,000 small betrayals of their own potential. The refusal to learn from pain, the fear of discomfort, the hunger for validation, the rejection of responsibility. These are not accidents of personality, but patterns of behavior that guarantee continued powerlessness. If you recognize these signs in yourself, understand that you are standing at a crossroads that will determine the entire trajectory of your life. One path is easy, requiring nothing but your pride and your excuses. You can continue to blame others for your position. Continue to seek validation from those who will never truly respect you. Continue to trust without testing. Continue to speak more than you observe. Continue to react emotionally rather than respond strategically. Continue to wear your kindness like armor in a world where predators feast on the naive. This path leads to mediocrity, irrelevance, and the slow, grinding misery of a life lived in service to forces you never learned to understand or control. You will be remembered, if at all, as someone who meant well but achieved little, who had good intentions but lacked the strength to make them matter. The other path is brutal. It demands that you abandon every comfortable lie you have told yourself about why your life is not what you want it to be. It requires you to develop self-mastery over emotions that have controlled you for years. It demands ruthless honesty about your weaknesses and the courage to transform them into strengths. It requires you to become dangerous not through cruelty or malice, but through competence, through unpredictability, through the kind of quiet strength that makes others think twice before testing you. Most will never choose this second path. They will read these words, feel a moment of uncomfortable recognition, and then return to the familiar patterns that keep them safely irrelevant. They will continue to wonder why the world does not reward their good intentions, while never developing the power to make those intentions matter. But the few who do choose transformation, who embrace the discomfort of growth over the comfort of stagnation, who trade the illusion of victimhood for the responsibility of agency, these become the most dangerous people in any room they enter. Not because they seek to harm others, but because they cannot be controlled, cannot be manipulated, cannot be dismissed. They become feared not for their cruelty, but for their competence. They become respected not for their likability, but for their strength.